Welcome to Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson, and since today is Sunday, we will be doing the Sunday Roundup where I talk about the lessons and my takeaways from this week's interviews with our guests. And like every week, we had some really amazing guests on the show. And so if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our interviews with successful real estate investors. So the first guest we had on Monday was Veena Jetty, and Veena was a lot of fun. And the first thing I took away from her interview was her goal. She told us that she usually doesn't share her real estate goal with everybody just because most people will say, oh, why do you need that much money? Or why is your goal so high? And I think this has to make us think about, the environment we put ourselves into and the people we surround ourselves with. One of the things that I've really picked up doing all the interviews with our guests here on Purchase to Profits, it's all the successful people set really big goals and they stick to it and they follow a system and get into a habit until they achieve those goals. So Veena's goal was to acquire $20 million worth of equity in real estate for herself in the next 3 years. So by the time she hits 35, even though we're not supposed to ask a lady's age, but by the time she hits the age of 35, she wants to have that $20 million worth of equity. And for me, when I hear a goal like that, I get excited because like a lot of other real estate investors, we want to shoot for the stars. We want to go big because there's no point in just doing things half-ass. So I really commend Veena for sharing that goal with us. And I think that's a really good reminder that we shouldn't be afraid or embarrassed about our goals. Just because you look at the successful people out there and they go big with their goals. And the second thing I took away from my chat with Veena was the situation she shared where she got into a development deal. It didn't go well. She took a bath, lost a lot of money, but she still paid the investors out of her own pocket. Not only did the investors get their money back, but they actually got paid according to the pro forma projections. And I think, when somebody is in that situation, fortunately, I have not been in that situation yet, knock on wood. But from the people I've spoken with who have been in that situation, it's really important not to burn those bridges with your investors. And so Veena, out of her own pocket, she paid back the investors and she took a big hit at the time. But as she explained, those investors have come back for deal after deal after deal since then because they had that relationship of trust. And I think it's important to recognize that on the investor side of the situation, they knew that she was losing money and they knew the project didn't go well, but they also knew that she was paying them out of her own pocket regardless. And I think that not only earns trust and respect, but it also shows that you're willing to put the investors first, which is in any syndication or any syndicator, the investors do come first. It's all about that alignment of interest, but you always want to put the investors' needs first because you're dealing with other people's money, and you have to show a lot of respect for that. So, lots of great tips with Veena. So be sure to check out that talk we had there. Next up on Tuesday, we had Bree Schmidt. Bree was a lot of fun too. So she actually bought 18 properties in 9 months. And that sounds like a lot of deal volume. And well, one of the things she explained to us was that, having, as a real estate investor, we don't like having money sitting in the bank account. It drives us nuts because it's earning, let's say, 0.5% interest. And for any good investor out there, that will keep them up at night, and they'll spend many a sleepless night thinking about their money just sitting there being eaten away by inflation. But she also gave us a really good lesson in that she was tempted at times to acquire properties that didn't fit her criteria or didn't meet the return she was expecting just because she was so anxious to get that money out of the bank into a property. And so she told us that, she has to stick with her criteria, have a clear goal of what she wants to accomplish when entering into a deal, And even if it takes longer to find a deal, it's worth it in the end because you're not sacrificing on the type of property or that return you're looking for. So I think that's really important because I'm guilty of it myself. Anytime you have money in the bank, you want to get it out there into a deal and start making some better returns on that rather than having that sit in the bank. But the big message there was having clear criteria and not deviating from that for a short term. Making yourself feel better in the short term, just having that money going out. And then she also talked about submarkets, and she took her submarket selection very, very seriously. And all she did was focus on that submarket. It doesn't, and real estate, as you know, is very, very local. And that's why, you have to become a local expert in whatever market you're working in. So she focused on her patch of land where she was acquiring all of her properties and became the expert at it. She knew everything going on. If something was happening on the other side of town, if it was major happening, affecting the whole city, obviously she would know. But if it was just minor stuff, it didn't matter what was going on, a state away, a province away, a city away. She focused on her patch of land and she became the pro. And that has allowed her to acquire more and more properties because she knows exactly what she's looking for. Again, that goes back to the criteria, but she also knows where that criteria fits in that submarket. So really good stuff from Bree. So make sure you check out that interview. Then we had Joel Block on. So Joel, he is a money raising expert. He is a pro, and he puts on some really great educational events. I'm actually heading to his capital raising symposium in a couple months. So if you want any more information, just send me a message, shoot me an email, and I can let you know all about that, and we can meet up at the event. So he had a really funny story. Well, I'm sure it wasn't funny at the time. So back in the 80s, it was his first deal. He had bought a shopping center, but he couldn't raise the money. He said he kept going to investors, trying to shop the deal, get people to invest, and they kept turning him down. But then they found asbestos in the building, and he tells us at the time asbestos was a really big deal. Everybody was scared about it. It still is a really big deal for the health concerns, but it was a hot button topic. So he got an agent. I can't remember if it was an agent or a lawyer on the other side who said, "Oh, you just have to dump this property. Asbestos is a really big deal," because they had just dealt with an asbestos issue on a previous deal. So he got to retrade the deal, come in with a better price. I think it was like $400,000 or something, which at the time was a lot of money. So then with the new price, after he retraded, he was able to go back to the investors and get people to invest in the deal. And I think the big lesson there is, if you're getting turned down by investors, maybe you have to take an inward look at yourself and look at the deal, because chances are either the structure of the deal or the returns, or even your strategy just isn't meeting either the criteria or the tolerance of those investors. So I think that's really important for anybody in that money raising game, in terms of syndication, whether you're raising for a fix and flip or a larger multifamily syndication or a fund. If we're getting turned down consistently, we have to take a look inside of ourselves. And then he also talked to us about the differences between a fund and a syndication. And I won't go into the main difference. I won't go into a lot of detail about the differences. But with a syndication, investors join forces with a general partner to acquire a single deal, whereas a fund, the investors are investing in a pool of money that is ready to act. So you're able to acquire multiple properties. Sometimes it's called a vulture fund. We saw quite a few of those back in 2008 during the global financial crisis. So two different ways of going at it. There's pros and cons to both. So if you're interested in that money raising structure, check out Joel's interview. It was certainly educational. And then we had Aaron Woodman. We had him on Thursday, and Aaron, he's investing in a development in Botswana of all places. I thought Ali Boone, who we had before, was in Nicaragua, but Botswana has to be one of the most unique locations that we've had mentioned on the show so far. And Aaron really talked to us about the formula he uses to find and weed out properties. So it was funny because as we were doing the interview, more and more emails of properties kept flooding his inbox. So I think we started the interview at like maybe 300 properties, and we ended at, let's say 500. And so when you have that much deal flow, because he's built a really great system and a good team, he needs a very specific and quick, easy way to weed out the properties that do have potential and those that don't. So he shared that with us. He goes through it in detail and explains all the steps. So if you're interested in that, check it out. And he also mentioned he was in the process when we spoke of putting together a $1 billion casino deal. Billion. So that was certainly really interesting. He also talked to us about a luxury flip. So flipping isn't just for those, $60,000 properties or, let's say $300,000 properties. He was flipping multi-million-dollar luxury properties. So really, really neat guy. He shared with us his challenges with his addiction, how he was able to bounce back, and he's built a really great system and a really great real estate investing business. Then last on Friday, we had Jason Yeruzzi. So Jason, really great guy, and he shared with us his story about buying a distressed property. It wasn't taken care of. But during the due diligence phase, he had some challenges in getting the financials from the owners just because, it wasn't taken care of. The finance, the bookkeeping was all over the place. So, but he gave us a really good tip. And I think this applies to any investor, whether you're doing the larger multifamily deals or the smaller single family. His tip was to put in the wording in the clause for the due diligence to make sure that the due diligence time period, so let's say the 30 days, whatever it is, doesn't start until the buyer has all the documents they've requested or require. So because in Jason's case, they were still scrambling for documents, and it was over a month later after the contract was accepted. So if he didn't have that, he'd be SOL, and he'd be having to make a decision based on only half of the information he needed. So in that, as he explained in the interview, he had all he was able to stall just because, according to the contract, the time clock had not started ticking yet. So he was able to eventually get all the documents he needed and conduct the due diligence. And then he also talked about scaling. And so he started off doing the single family homes. And then he was wondering, how do I take this investing and really scale it and move it up to the next level with larger deals? He mentioned mindset shift. So, and this is what comes up a lot when I talk with the really successful real estate investors. The biggest difference I've found between the people starting out, the people with mid-level businesses, and the people at the very top, it's all about mindset. Because people, we all have the same basic skills. We all have the same math skills. We all have the same people skills. Some people are a little better. Some people are a little worse. But we're not all that different. But what is different is the mindset. So for Jason to bump up to the multifamily properties, he changed his mindset. He started learning all about syndication, and they also looked for people who were already successful at syndicating. And I think that's a really good takeaway, because success leaves clues. If somebody has built a successful real estate business, I can guarantee you it's not by accident. So they have done things. They have either a mindset, they have a system, they have a pattern of things that they do that has made them successful. And so that's what Jason did. He recognized he needed to change his mindset to move up to a higher level of investing. And he also sought out people who were more successful than him so he could learn their systems. Well, that's a great Sunday roundup for this week. We have another great week of guests next week. So make sure, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and check back for who we have on Purchase to Profits. See you next time.